Good morning. This talk, like all my other ones, will not be very well organized, but it worked on me all night. So about 2:30, Peggy asked me, "Are you in pain?" So I was literally making all these noises. But I haven't told her this. But my noises were joy. I was experiencing such happiness to have been blessed with the teaching and practices of the Heart Sutra. And I slowly, after 25 years, I slowly am starting to understand the insight that brings us to the other shore, as Thay describes it, and why that insight is holy, is transformational. But first, a footnote on hindrances. No, we could do the whole retreat on this. This is part of the problem in the Buddhist tradition. Any topic you take, you could spend a year. And at the end of the year, you still have more. It's that, to use a Margaret Mead term, is that thick with richness and depth. But here, the secret to working with the hindrances is turning the hindrances into a meditation practice. Not an enemy to be defeated, but a human experience to be investigated. Or as Thich Nhat Hanh would say to us, meditation is about stopping, shamatha, Soto Zen calls it serene reflection, and it's about looking deeply, as Thay would say. So the practice here is turning our experience of the hindrances and, pick one and practice with it for a week. We were at Plum Village one year, a long time ago, and people were asking Thich Nhat Hanh about meditation and some of their difficulties with meditation. And one person said to Thay, I get so very bored during my meditations. And Thay said, well, so sorry for you. I never get bored. Why? Because in addition to the calming and settling down of shamatha, meditators of thousands of years ago chose topics to look deeply into. Actually, if you go back to the Abhidharma period, there were 40 different meditations a master would give a student depending on what that student needed. And I've been having some invitations to do this with people who are in the last stages or the first stages of passing over. And which I did not volunteer for, but I am learning how to create meditations for people to help them ease their way into what my Cheyenne native friend says is to walk on. To walk on gracefully and to walk on peacefully. So the first thing about practicing with a hindrance in meditation is to recognize it, train yourself. The Tibetans call it mind training. Train your mind to recognize the rising of a hindrance and train your mind to recognize the fading away of a hindrance. And you're already training your mind this way in your first meditation as you pay attention to your breath as it rises and fades away. No, this is the Heart Sutra, by the way. Every cycle of breath is the Heart Sutra. Phenomena rises and disappears. So even if you just sit for 10 minutes every morning, pay attention to the rising and fading away of your breath in order to train yourself to become comfortable with the rising and falling of everything. And as you get more at ease, I don't mean comfort from a furniture point of view. I mean deep ease, stability, solidity with the experience of the rising and falling of all things. So this morning when I was walking over here, I felt like a mighty elk. Then I took another step and I felt like a mighty cloud. And then a leaf. And then a mighty mountain. And then a mighty rabbit. Everywhere, everything I looked at turned into mightiness. That's what the Heart Sutra did to me overnight. And accept. Be present with the rising and falling and accept that it's rising. Don't deny, don't suppress, don't push away. And accept that it's fading. But if you push away the arising, the fading away, you can't accept. Because you're giving so much meaning to the arising. It's a natural process, this arising and fading away. So becoming more comfortable, at ease, and accepting what's happening within us and around us. There are people in our society and societies across the world who are having difficulties with the arising and fading of their societies, as if that's not a natural thing. One of the great teachings, anybody who's involved in social change, social action, cares about those kind of things, I would refer you to study and learn to practice the 8 realization of great beings, which Thay has translated. Not many other people have translated it, but and the first realization of great beings is that no matter how fabulous, how great, how stupendous a culture, a civilization, an institution is, it too rises and fades away. And unless we can anchor ourselves into the actual experiences we're having as human beings, we end up fighting and hating our life. So investigate your hindrance. And investigate it by learning to notice what happens somatically in your body when the hindrance comes up. So if anger comes up, if the hindrance of anger comes up or ill will comes up, where do you feel that in your body? Because it's most likely, at least in my experience, my body knows before my mind knows. This is really helpful. My body knows I'm upset before it connects up here. So with every hindrance, and this can change all the time, but get somatic with your practice, not just intellectual. I spent a year 2 years ago working on the somatics of meditation practice. And feel what's happening in your body. And your body is so precious. It's so full of information. So physically. And then notice what energies get released when that hindrance comes up. And these could be really different energies. Emotional energies, feelings, sadness, aversion. But also notice this experience of when a hindrance comes up in you might have a feeling of rushing, of wanting to move, or a feeling of sinking. And the more I practice, the more I'm starting to understand some of the early Christian songs. I was just thinking about sinking sand. To know what is this experience of sinking. I don't mean in Tai Chi. I mean the experience of feeling like you fell down a pit and you haven't hit the bottom yet. And to know that experience is just an experience. Or being lifted, being elevated. That hindrance, you may discover, elevates you. And literally, your body wants to move up. And those kind of sensations, and there are many more. But to learn your body, learn your own mind, the practice of meditation is an invention each one of us has to do for ourselves. We get all this training and we get all this teaching so that we can create the path of our own practice. We cannot turn that over to someone else. Monastics and temples cannot do this for us. One of Thich Nhat Hanh's favorite quotes about meditation comes, I think, from Master Tung Hoi in Vietnam, that once you understand how your mind works, and I would add your body works, the practice gets easier. This is coming home to yourself. Really learning yourself, valuing, appreciating the uniqueness of who you are, and learning to practice with that uniqueness, rather than wishing it was a different uniqueness. You know, some of us still shopping around for ourselves. This giant mall. Discover yourself. But it's all out there. It's all hanging on hangers, on racks, with blinking lights. You know, there's something neuroscientifically we know in the human brain that likes shiny things. But that is not how you will discover your mystery, depth, and greatness, which is already inside of you, hiding in your hindrance, disguised. And cognitive, you know, scientifically, if when I experiences, I mentioned yesterday, having agitation come up in me around the election, my body's experience of that agitation lasted less than 30 seconds. What lasted for hours was my story about it. And so too with all the hindrances. Our cognitive process sustains the hindrance. You know, you may be upset about stuff that even never happened. This is possible if it's the nature of the mind. There are stories I won't go into because there isn't time. In the African American experience, where whole communities of African Americans were routed and burned to the ground and people killed based on a lie about what happened, and people believed it. And then you went into emotional contagion. But this is also an individual process, not just a collective process of having our stories carry us beyond any reality at all. So notice your stories. Don't shut them down. Be curious about these stories. Why am I telling myself this story? Where could this possibly have come from? What ancestor is whispering in my ear? And motivation. Is there a call to action out of your practice with your hindrance? Is there a call to action? And on one of the, what I taught from yesterday is a collection and a composite of teachings and commentaries from the Theravadan tradition all around the five hindrances, which you can find in the Four Foundations of Mindfulness text, is where the five hindrances are first mentioned and talked about by the Buddha. And so one of them I read was, well, maybe you should take a nap. Seems kind of mundane. But sometimes that's what we need to just stop. And one of the great things about a nap is it stops the story from continuing. It's like getting that actor off stage. And last and most importantly, to practice non-identity making with your experience. For example, and I'll come back to this because this is all referred to in the Heart Sutra again and again in different ways. But this is my body. This is Larry's body. But I am not this body. These are Larry's eyes, but I am not these eyes. These are Larry's feet, but I am not these feet. And now I'm moving us into the types of wisdom that the Heart Sutra teachings and realizations are rooted in. And there's three kinds of wisdom classically referred to in many Buddhist texts around the Heart Sutra. In particular, and neurotic that I am, I checked this with the Chinese translation and the Japanese translation of the Heart Sutra, blah, blah, blah. Theravadan commentaries, and everybody said the same thing. They use a little bit different language. Three kinds of wisdom, and I'll read them for you. The first wisdom is mundane wisdom, ordinary wisdom, everyday wisdom, functional wisdom. In some of the sutras, in commentaries, you will find the word associated with this wisdom. This mundane wisdom. Is the wisdom of the worldling. You may have come across this in some of your own study It is the wisdom of the worldling, the mind, and the wisdom that perceives everything as a separate self entity. This is a bottle of smart water. Okay? And in the world of a worldling, in the mind of a worldling, this is smart water. However, that's just the container and the label on the container. And actually, this water that's actually in this label comes from the sink in our bedroom. Which I'm hoping is smart, but I'm not betting on it. But it is nourishing. So a worldling never gets inside the bottle. A worldling never asks Thay's favorite question, "Are you sure?" And there's many teachings by many teachers in Buddhism, both contemporary and early, that talks about this mundane, worldling paradigm is full of what's called cognitive error. That is, perceiving the impermanent as permanent. The second kind of wisdom, and I put these in a circle just to indicate they're not linear, though there is a quality of practice that can help. There is a journey here, but I put these in a circle to indicate they're inside of each other. So if you find yourself, so when we get ready to catch our next flight, which goes to Mexico City for our retreat, I want my pilot to be a worldling in his capacity or her capacity to fly the plane. I want them to be able to read the instruments that direct us and guide us and carry us to our next destination. So this does not mean bad. It just means limited understanding. And the thing in Buddhist tradition is that we are liberated through our understanding, through our self-understanding. And we practice to gain that self-understanding that frees us from being confused about the nature of phenomena. The next level is called supramundane. S-U-P-R-A, mundane, supramundane. Wisdom transcends the mundane. Wisdom that knows there's something, that the bottle is a label, but there's something inside. And here we are referring to the mind of a bodhisattva. And this is the mind I'm sure I'm not spelling that right. That comes from no sleep. But anyway, the bodhisattva's mind begins to understand emptiness. And in the Western world, we have misunderstood that one word in Buddhism. I could just write a book. Well, I think I did write one paper on this, how misunderstood we were. Emptiness in Buddhism, it means fullness, not absence of. It means full of. So, Thay would always have us practice. When you say something is empty, your next question is empty of what? So then he would say, well, this cup is empty of, well, it's not empty of air. Air's in here. It's not empty of coffee. Coffee is in here. And then when I start to think about where did my coffee come from? How many people's lives are involved in picking in the hills, in the rain, up in the mountains, and looking for shade trees? I spent 3 years helping to build coffee co-ops in the mountains of Jamaica. I know what it takes. So this cup is not empty. Even if I pour everything out, it's still full of air. And what's in the air? I mean, you can keep going. That's the Buddhist understanding of emptiness. And this is the beginning of super mundane wisdom. This is the beginning of wisdom that can liberate us from the pain that comes from thinking things are permanent when they're not. And my favorite thing to think is permanent that's not is moi. Is me. And third level of wisdom here, I love this old line, unsurpassed. Unsurpassed. This is the wisdom of a Buddha. Unsurpassed. And unsurpassed means we really, we can't explain it. There's no words for this. Up here in the mundane wisdom, there's language for things. Turn right, turn left, up, down. You walk through the line for lunch or dinner. There's little signs that say, well, this is chickpeas, and then here's potatoes. That's the mundane wisdom. That's fine. We need that to be in this world and to function. But our practice, once we have the mundane wisdom on our plate, is to look deeper and to experience deeper, and then taste the sunshine and taste the rain and taste the open hearts that prepared our food and the sweat and tears that went into the harvesting of what we eat and so often take for granted where it comes from. I want to thank our beloved friends Shane and Emily, who came with us from Vashon Island, where we now live. Emily is there filming me, and there's Shane over there. And they're Sangha leaders on Vashon Island. They're also helping Peggy and I be more organized. And so we're developing our Lotus work in recording and starting to video, and soon we'll have a YouTube channel and so that the teachings can get out. This is not about us, it's about getting the teachings out. So another way to describe what we're talking about here is the practice of the Heart Sutra invites us to have right view about our ancestors. What are the views we have of our ancestors? And most often, and through no fault of our own, our views and understanding of our ancestors has been limited to the worldling, to the mundane level. And so we see them with all their warts and failure and suffering and pain and all the difficulties, which in the conventional and in the mundane world is correct. Kind of. Sort of. Almost. Correct. We see them as separate selves with names. And this is a beautiful altar. The next time you come, and I try to see every face, and feel some energy here. And when the next time you come up here, look at it from the super mundane point of view of these faces. And I'll come back to that again in a moment. But now I want to shift. I want to say one more thing about the hindrances. Yes. Yes, here it is. So continuing the same way, there's a key word in Buddhism which is referenced in the Heart Sutra. Sankhara. That's the Pali language for it. It means mental formation. So you might remember that line in the Heart Sutra of mental formation. Now, this is the second secret to your hindrances and your practice with them. Please remember, your hindrances are not separate self-entities. They are not solid. They are not permanent. They are a container, a label for an experience you are having as a human being, and that experience is a mental, emotional experience, a mental state. It is not a newly constructed building. It's so easy to think our mental states of being are permanent. One of the issues across America today is the remarkable and tragic increase in suicide of people under 20. It's true everywhere, across every group of people, class, race, economics. And when you talk to some of the young people who knew their friends or who considered it themselves, part of it is they experience a mental state as permanent and inescapable. And this is global. When I lived in Hong Kong and worked there for 5 or 6 years, every year when grades came out, young people who got B's instead of A's would kill themselves. Because they didn't live up to the expectation. They had this mental formation of perfection that they did not live up to. And the translation of this is, this refers to an experience that's put together. A mental formation is an experience that is put together. It is not a separate self-entity. It is made of all kinds of things that came together. Just like everything else. A word from the Buddha about this. His last words, and there's several, of course, versions of this, and everything in Buddhism is several versions of itself. Disciples, this I declare to you, all conditioned things are subject to disintegration. And you could put in parentheses, me included. Strive untiringly to work out your liberation, to work out your insight, to work out your breakthrough. And the second aspect of mental formations is called mental fabrications. And mental fabrications are our participation in the formation. So I finally discovered that my wife, my beloved wife, cannot make me angry. Only I can make me angry. What freedom! What freedom to realize I participate in creating my own experience of being human. Now, if I want this formation of, let's say I have a mental formation around sadness. Some sadness came up for me around the Emmett Till desecration of the site where he was killed. And I'm working on a poem for that, but it isn't ready yet because I'm still practicing with it. As I'm wading through formations, like going through the jungle. I'm remembering my own trips to Mississippi, where I learned to practice non-fear. So as a human being, we have formations. If you remember Thay's teachings on selective watering, store consciousness in seeds, we have seeds from our ancestors, but not just the ancestors we know or think we know. I have the advantage of having no idea who my parents are. And what that has meant for me is there's a whole lot of stuff I didn't have to make up. I have absolutely no idea, nor do I care, in the best sense of the word. My sister and every child in my family, the four of us are all adopted by a fabulous family. My sister and I, who were the oldest, we had a conversation about this once. Should we try to find out who our parents were? And we decided, this was like, 12, 13, we decided, no, we should focus on being happy that we were born and that we have a loving family that has adopted us. So I've been in meetings and conferences and retreats where people were like consumed with how imperfect their parents were. Parents can't live with them. Can't live without them. That's my practice. It's that simple. If you have children, teach them this. It'll save on therapy bills later. It's because we get caught in the mundane wisdom, which is full of judgment and poor qualities of discernment and discrimination. That is, not discerning correctly or inclusively. So the family that adopted me, I have practiced with them And so I know my adopted mother, who was part Cherokee, part African American, who's up here, by the way. This is Viola Paris. And if I have one thing that I'm envious about in my whole life, is I think she has one of the two coolest names I've ever heard. I would take her name if I could. I think it's just so cool. The second name, of course, is Master Empty Cloud. But she's just gorgeous. She was 5'9", truly compassionate. And at church every Sunday, grew up in a Pentecostal church my parents helped found. My sister and I had worked out the timing for when our mother would start dancing in church. We could see it coming, right? It's like, okay, she's getting ready to blow. And it was always the energy of joy. It was always the energy of vimutti, release. She danced out her pain, her sorrow, her frustration. She danced out of the mundane wisdom into emptiness. Fine woman. The Heart Sutra, and in some ways the entire Buddhist tradition, is designed to train us and encourage us to develop what's called perception of the profound. And that's what was happening to me last night. I had the honor of, some of you know, Brother Fap Day, also known as Brother Adrian, who passed away recently. He was a monastic at Deer Park Monastery. But before he was a monastic at Deer Park Monastery, he was part of a lay practice community that Peggy and I were a part of in the hillside of Santa Barbara. And it was in that lay practice environment that he discovered his monastic calling. Actually, we've had several people who spent time with Peggy and I who then decided to become monastics. So Sister Chan called me and said, you know, you should be a great recruiter. What a powerful calling, the monastic life. And it's not, think of this as energy. Think of this as a response to society. I am not going to live my life in X paradigm. I'm going to live my life as best I can in a different kind of paradigm. In the foundation of Buddhism, things were so restricted by class and gender. In early India, this may sound somewhat familiar. So he created his own community. It took some time, but he was the first religious community in India to accept untouchables. I'm creating my own way, a society. And I know this to be true because I lived and worked in India for several years. And when people thought I was an untouchable, because the way you identify an untouchable is they are people with darker skin. So when I first arrived, people would not wait on me. Some places wouldn't let me in because untouchables couldn't come into that restaurant. So my practice then was to find untouchables on the street and do prostrations in front of them. And I did this all over Calcutta. Same with beggars. And the word started to spread around about this crazy black American bowing to everybody. No, you don't get to bow to me first. I get to bow to you. Our practice is to transform the fabric of our societies. And just remember, it's an ongoing, everlasting process to do so. There's never going to be a perfect society. William Irwin Thompson, who I've spent some time with, an MIT grad, in one of his great books, says every human invention has a utopian flaw. And to me, that utopian flaw is because humans created it. And that's okay. We just have to keep it up. In Canada, coming up in September, is a conference on mindful society. So if you have, in Toronto and Ottawa, if you have friends, there is a movement afoot around this planet shaping a whole new fabric of society. Please do not believe what you see on mainstream news as the state of the world. That's the state of someone's world. It is not the state of the world. Perceive the profound. So last night I decided to give a little more background that's in the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra is a summary of all the teachings of Buddhism in many, many ways. And there's a sutra. The people at the front desk in administration go, "You sure print strange things." So I was sitting there, I was like, it's time for the Sabha Sutta. I thought about this 2 days ago, but it came back up last night, so that's why I'm going to summarize it for you. I'll read it. In Sabha, this is translated as the Sutra on the All. Now I'll read to you the summary. Thus I have heard, at one time the Buddha was staying at Annapindika's park in the Jeddah Grove in Sravasti. Now at that time a famous Brahmin approached the Buddha at his residence, exchanged greetings, and sat down to one side and said this to the Buddha: "Gautama, it is says the all. You talk about the all. What is meant by the all?" The Buddha told the Brahmin, "The all refers to 12 doors, namely, eye and forms, ear and sounds, nose and smells, tongue and taste, body and touches, and the mind and mind objects. This is called the all. If anyone were to retort this by saying, 'I reject this all that the recluse Gautama has proclaimed, I now abandon it, I am going to find another all,' that would merely be one word against another. When asked further, 'Did you find the other all?' I did not. Because it is outside of our domain of experience." Then the famous Brahmin, having heard the Buddha's word, was happy and rejoiced and practiced with great respect. So that's one piece of this. And then over the next, another iteration, of course, adds in consciousness. So let me give you one example. And you've heard this is in the Heart Sutra. Thay's talked about this a lot. Here are our sense bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. So in the Indian understanding of the sensory world, there are 6, not 5, because the mind is a sense. The mind itself is a sensory organ, meaning it can be influenced, it can be shaped, it can be impacted. And this sense, when my eye sense comes in contact with a sight, a form, then I consciousness is born. Now, Madison Avenue knows this. Everywhere in the world, we figure this out. We don't call it this, but we know if images arise, consciousness is triggered around that image. So there's the eye organ. And when that eye organ comes in contact with a form or something visual, eye consciousness emerges in us. And the same with ear. The Quaker group is quite loud, I noticed. So I've been working with my ear consciousness. Okay? And they've been having a great time and laughter and kids running around. And cool. But I had to work with it because my ear was in contact with that sound, and all of a sudden my ears got bigger and I could hear more. Ear consciousness. So eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, taste, tongue consciousness. And that's why in Buddhism, when it says guard the sense doors, it is asking us to pay attention to what we're in contact with, because what we become in contact with creates consciousness. And consciousness leads us toward a direction of our life force. It's just brilliant. It's just amazing people figured this out thousands of years ago. And the practice here, the challenge here for all of us, is when we experience that connection between our organ, our sense organ, and object, and the quality of consciousness that emerges, is to grasp for that. If we like it, if we like that tongue consciousness, it's easy to eat too much. Or whatever. But you understand that? Because there's some things I know I can just keep eating. Because it tastes good to me, but it may not taste good to you. Each one of us has our own experience of this process. The Buddha was an experientialist, not a philosopher. The teachings are all about the experience of being human. How do I experience my humanity? And how do I practice with that humanity in a way that frees me from suffering? And by freeing from suffering, we mean in Buddhism, freedom from grasping, freedom from clinging, and freedom from attachment or freedom from holding on. What is holding on? My best image for that is going bowling and not letting go of the ball. You can do that if you want. I see people do this all the time with their life. But when you and that ball come in contact with those pins, suffering. So our practice is to check in with ourselves. Actually, the last note in here that I'll mention from this sutra, the Venerable Maglayana, one of the early famous monks, core monks in Buddhism, asked the Buddha, where did it go? Maglayana asked the Buddha, how is one awakened? The Buddha begins by answering that one is awakened as one learns that nothing is worth clinging to. And this includes your hindrances and every other experience. The Heart Sutra is a great teaching about the phenomenal world, our experiences. But the phenomenal world includes the tree and the rock and the mountain and the leaf. And so when our beloved teacher Thay says, a leaf never dies, that's unsurpassed wisdom. It's not ordinary wisdom. It is not mundane wisdom. And the Heart Sutra is encouraging us in the path of realizing unsurpassed wisdom. There's a song that's been bothering me, that positively for the last couple of months, and it's from my previous community. And a friend of mine named Jim Bell, who's a Native American pastor, taught my community this song. And so this has been coming up, and I only could remember one line and another line, but thanks to Google, I was able to find it. It's called Harvest Time. And this is what we need to be doing with our ancestors. Harvesting the very best that we've been given. And discovering what we have yet to harvest, that we have forgotten about, or we've been too angry or hurt to notice. Now let's see if I can get a key that won't destroy the room. So relax, assume that your ancestors are your working ground for being a marvelous human being, a precious life. And just take a minute with a few breaths and ease your way into that state of having a precious life. The seed I have scattered in spring time with weeping, and watered with tears and with dews from on high. Another may shout when the harvester's reaping shall gather my grain in the sweet by and by. Over and over, yes, deeper and deeper, my heart is pierced through with life's sorrowing cry. But the tears of the sower and the songs of the reaper shall mingle together in joy by and by. Another may reap what in spring time I've planted. another rejoice in the fruit of my pain, not knowing my tears when in summer I fainted, while toiling sad-hearted in sunshine and rain. Over and over, yeah, deeper and deeper, my heart is pierced through with life, sorrowing cry. But the tears of the sower and the songs of the reaper shall mingle together in joys by and by. Now I have to stand up for the next part because that's what Jim would do. And he was a tall native man. His hands would be out like this. The thorns will have choked and the summer sun's blasted the most of the seed which in springtime I've sown. But the Lord who has watched while my weary toil lasted will give me a harvest for what I have done. Over and over, yes, deeper and deeper, my heart is pierced through with life's sorrowing crying. But the tears of the sower and the songs of the reaper shall mingle together in joy by and by. I mentioned Fat Day, who came to me last night. I was in the hospital room when we disconnected everything. And the teaching of the Heart Sutra was never clearer. So I want to talk to you about training ourselves to be able to recognize our ancestors' Zen question, original face. You've heard this when I studied Japanese practice in China, in Taiwan. This old question, what is your face before you were born? And so my friend Fab Day, and then recently, last week, another Sangha member in Seattle who I was practicing with to help her pass over, walked on. She appeared last night. So I'm making all these noises. But it was joy. The original face is not a question of what I looked like when I came out of my mother's womb. It's not a question of the form and genetics of our ancestors. It's not a question of their pain and their suffering and their skillfulness or unskillfulness. And you can go as far back as you want. I really like it. There's a picture of Lucy here. I think everybody should get a picture of her and put it up somewhere in your space. Otherwise, you can get really confused about who and what we are. The original face of our ancestors. These are all clouds. But our ancestors are the blue sky. The original face of our ancestors is the blue sky, the rain, the wind. I saw a picture once from the Hubble telescope, and I was working at a hospital, and we had just gone through a session looking at some different pictures of genetics. And I was like speechless when I saw a picture from the Hubble telescope that looked exactly like a picture of a gene formation I had just seen. Original face. Now we're starting to get there. Our original face of our ancestors is impermanence. That's their original face. They are phenomena that rise and fall, come to be and come not to be. Their original face is suchness itself. I'm talking now about unsurpassed wisdom. The emptiness of conditions and time and space that gave form to our ancestors. Oh, wow. What a mystery. What a wonder. Our original face, your original face, will reveal itself to you anytime. When you are practicing, and that means living your life is what practicing means, not just sitting on a cushion. Anytime when we are not grasping, clinging, and attaching, our original face is there for us to behold. Sister Chung Kong has such a great name, Dharma name, True Emptiness. And our own true emptiness becomes available to us as an experience that is deep and wide and indescribable and vast and holy whenever we are able to not grasp, not cling, or attach to making ourselves something that we can't let go of. So last night I felt like I fell down the well of original face. And the joy of not being confused about my true nature. You know, the teachings given to the sick in the Plum Village Chanting book and other forms of this, where Thay likes to talk about this often, when the monks went to be at the bedside of Anapindika, the businessman who supported the early Sangha. And Sister Chung Kong does such a beautiful job of sharing this. I am not caught in this body. It's a lovely body, but I'm not caught in it. I'm not caught in these eyes. Lovely eyes, colors, forms, sights, ears, sounds. But I'm not caught in this phenomena. And why am I not caught? Because I am this phenomena. And then the Buddhist tradition does something I have yet to discover in other religious traditions. The Buddhist tradition says, okay, everything I just taught you about perception of the profound and emptiness and original face and non-grasping and non-clinging and non-attachment applies to me. Gate, parasam gate. Where have you heard that? I mean, what? I've been practicing this path, and now you tell me it's just a path. Not to be clung to, not to be grasped after, not to be attached to, but to be participated in, so that I can constantly rediscover and re-meet the original face of my ancestors, which is also my original face.